Hello, my name is Joe DeVault. I'm a graduate student at SMU. I'm in the software engineering program, and I'm here to talk to you about an application that I've written called the Movie Finder. Here's a screenshot from the main page of the Movie Finder. In order to see this page, a user has to log in. In this case, we see that Mike has logged in. When that happens, a user can see all the movies that are assigned to them. The user can search for movies, and they can also paginate through the various movies that are available. During the demo, we'll also see the look and feel when an administrator logs in, which is very different from when a user logs in. The Movie Finder is an MVC web application that allows users to find and stream, or if they choose to download their favorite movies. It's a client-server type application, as are both styles. The main point that I'm going to show during this presentation is the differences between a layered multi-tiered object-oriented application versus more like a main program with a lot of functions and a non-layered architecture. In this application, customers can make changes to their account. They can view movies. Site administrators can log in and edit or delete or create movies, as well as update or delete user accounts. Here's the L2 diagram for the object-oriented style. As you'll see here in a minute when we look at the other simpler style, this one has three main tiers: a UI tier, a business service, what's called, or what some might call a business logic tier, and then a data access tier. And also, in addition to the tiers, you'll see there are also columns or verticals in the sense that we have domain objects or domain models. We have a user domain, we have a movie domain, and we have a home domain that helps to render content onto the web application. Here's the class diagram for the object-oriented style. This shows that we have this account, which is synonymous for user, as well as a movie controller. That's the UI of the application. Below that is the service layer, and below that is the data access layer. And this shows the various methods in those different layers or tiers that support the application. I've taken a couple of sequences from the application to show them here. Again, to showcase the multiple tiers involved, we have a UI that's represented by the controller. We have a business logic layer that's represented by the movie service. And then we have the data access layer. We have these same sequence diagrams when it comes to the user. So we have a user controller or an account controller, we have an account service, and we have an account data access layer that can get details by ID. It can get all users. In this case, we can get all movies. So this highlights or showcases the not only the layers and the different levels of the application, but also the object-oriented nature of using movie and user. So here are the different components on the left that we just discussed. We have a UI, services and data access layer across the three major domain objects of the application, and on the right hand side are the classes that support that component. In contrast, this is the L2 diagram for the main program. Here you can see we no longer have the domain objects. We just have a main class, a main controller, or a main component in the UI, and that main component has a series of method calls that can directly call data access to retrieve data. Here's a simpler class diagram that shows that. In this case, you can see that we have the movie context represents the database. You can see there is a movie object and there is a user profile object, but those really are just data transfer, DTOs. Really, there's just two layers. There's a front end that calls a back end and gets data. Here's the sequence diagram that shows the simple model. Here you can see it has a main controller and a main data access. And since we don't have really a domain name inside this main function, we have get movies and get movies by ID. We have get user by ID, and these are all contained in the main controller of the UI, and they call a similar function in the data access, which again, instead of being user data access or movie data access, it's just main data access because we're following the main program and function architectural style. So here is the much simpler mapping between the component and the classes. And if you saw a minute ago, we had these different domain objects like movie and user. Here we just have a main controller object in the UI, and it calls data access, and that's represented by the components on the left and the classes on the right. So as far as pros and cons, the pros to an object-oriented layered style would be that the code would consist of reusable layers. This is in terms of both the components that are available, like the business service component, the different objects, like a different application could call the user object, it could call the movie object. This type of application, because it is layered, is integrated, so if I want to change out my database at some point, I'm no longer tightly coupled to my front end. This type of architecture is considered to be industry supported or industry best practice. It follows more of a patterns-based approach and is considered part of the overall solid design principles. Some of the cons of this approach really are in line with its complexity. So there's a learning curve. It uses an entity framework to help persist the data to the back end. It has what's called separation of concern, which is where you have the different layers of business services and data access and UI. So that creates complexity. It also uses dependency injection, and it codes to an interface instead of an implementation, which is goes hand in hand with the solid design principles. These types of coding approaches are complex, and so there is a learning curve associated with it. The same can be said of the technologies involved. If you were to look at the number of libraries in the object-oriented layered style, it uses uses a technology called NuGet packages to go out and get the various things like the entity framework, the Unity for the dependency injection. So again, a better application, a more reliable, but inherently more complex and a higher learning curve. So the pros of a main program with a lot of function calls would be that it's a very simple program. It's obviously very easy to learn, very easy to support because it doesn't have the integrated layers. Time to market would be a lot faster because you don't have to really architect anything. You just sort of, prototype it, build it on the fly. It's considered RAD development. There's no dependency issues involved. The cons to that type of program would be the flip side of that. It would not be scalable or extensible. Essentially, what you have is a working prototype. In many cases that's considered throwaway code because you have your data intermingling with your business logic, tightly coupled, and that's not really enterprise grade code. So, in case it's not obvious from the way I'm describing the pros and cons, I chose an object-oriented approach. The rationale would be that anything that is tightly coupled, all in one layer, that doesn't use domain models and domain objects would be considered a prototype and more of a throwaway code, and that's really not the way you write an application that's going to be used for a while. A well-written layered application has reusable components, so that once you write it once, you get to re-leverage it again and again, which drives down the cost of development, which is a good thing. And anytime you have well-understood domains like movies, users, that type of thing, then an object-oriented approach using layers is a really good fit. So here's proof of my compilation. It shows that all 4 projects, the models project, data access project, business logic, and the UI all compiled just fine. And then I'll go ahead and give a walkthrough of the application so we can see the registration, the login, the search capability, as well as some of the admin screens. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and register a new user. We'll call this person John. Okay, so once John's in, he can contact the company if he needs to. He can read about the site. If he needs to, he wants to change his password later, he can do that, and he can come look at search for items. So if he sees it on page 2, he can navigate to page 2. He can go back to page 1. If it's further down, like page 7, he can do a search for it. And so that's the functionality for the user. So to see an admin functionality, if we go ahead and log in as an admin, we can see that admins have user administration capability, movie administration, and they can create different roles, like an admin role or like a user role. So if we look at that, there's the current roles that have been defined. We can, for example, go in and look at someone who's been defined in the account and see what kind of access they have. So for example, this person has admin, so if we wanted to add another type of user role, we could do that, and then say, so test row 2, save, and we save that, and then you can see the roles have been saved. If we want to come back in here, we can edit a movie. Make it $10.50. We can also create new movies. And for example, if we want to delete a user, so we want to delete Tom. So that's the administration of the site. So that's about it really. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments down at the bottom or email me at jdevault@smu.com. Thank you very much.